Good morning and a very warm welcome to today's webinar. On behalf of the London School of Emerging Technology, I'm delighted to welcome all of our participants joining us for this insightful session, The Founder as a Brand, How Founders Build Authority that Attracts Customers, Investors and Opportunities. Whether you are currently building a startup, planning to launch a business, developing your professional reputation, or exploring ways to attract customers and investors, we hope today's discussion gives you practical ideas that you can apply to your own journey. We would also like to encourage everyone to participate throughout the session. Please share your thoughts and responses in the comment box whenever we ask a question. We'll also have a dedicated question and answer session towards the end, so please post your questions in the chat as the session progresses. And it's now my pleasure to welcome our speaker for today, Amy Kohl. Amy is the founder of The Female Founder, a platform supporting women entrepreneurs through education, mentorship, community events, and practical business guidance. She also works with early stage founders, helping them develop their ideas, business plans, pitch decks, and growth strategies. Amy, we're delighted to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us and sharing your knowledge and experience with our audience. Before we begin the presentation, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little about your work with founders?
Thank you so much. What a great introduction. So hello everyone and welcome, and it's really great to have you all joining us today. So I'm really excited to be part of this session and to have the opportunity to discuss a subject that's become more and more important for founders, how your reputation, expertise, communication and visibility can influence the growth of your business. So before we begin, I want to clarify something really important. And this is not another webinar about becoming a social media influencer. It's not about designing your personal logo, and it's not about posting every single day on LinkedIn or whatever other platform you're on. Instead, we're going to explore something a lot more important, and that's how people make decisions about founders before they even decide to buy, invest, or collaborate, or even reply to an email. Many founders spend years improving their products, hiring better teams, refining their technology, and perfecting their business model. And they often ask themselves, why am I still struggling to attract investors? Why aren't customers responding? Why do competitors with similar products seem to get all of the opportunities? And the answer usually is not the product, it's the perception. People rarely evaluate businesses in complete isolation. They evaluate people behind those businesses. So if you think about it, if someone introduced two different startups to you today, what would you probably do first? You would search them on LinkedIn. You would check their company website. You might Google their interviews. You might look for customer feedback. You would actually try to understand who these people are before deciding to trust their company. And that process happens every single day without realizing it. Every founder has a brand already. So the question today is that brand helping your business or is it limiting it? So over the next hour, we're going to explore how successful founders create authority, attract opportunities, and build long-term credibility. And that's not through fancy marketing tricks, but it's through the way that you position yourself within your industry. So we'll look at practical examples, interactive discussions, and a case study that challenges some of the biggest misconceptions that founders have about visibility and influence. So before we move on to the next slide, I'd like to ask everyone a quick question. So you can type your answer in the chat or you can kind of write it down on your own notebook. When someone hears your name today, what is the one thing that you hope they'll immediately associate with you? So take about 30 seconds. We have a chat box. We'll have a look through the answers. Please don't overthink it. Just share the first thing that comes to mind. And keep those answers in mind, because at the end of the session today, we're going to revisit that question and see whether your perception has changed a little bit. So I'll give you 30 seconds to have a good think about that. If you don't feel comfortable sharing it in the chat, that's okay. We'll move on, but keep that to yourself. So slide 2, how to build your reputation and how that creates business opportunities before your product does. So let's begin with one of the biggest mindset shifts that every founder needs to make. Look carefully at the title on this slide. It doesn't say how your product creates different opportunities. It says how your reputation creates business opportunities before your product does. So that's an important distinction. Think about the last time that you booked a consultant, you hired an agency, or you considered working with a startup. Did you immediately purchase? Probably not. So you probably looked for different signals. You searched online, you checked reviews, you explored the founder's background, you wanted some reassurance. And this behavior is not unique to customers. Investors do it, partners do it, journalists do it. Every potential employee does it. And every important business relationship begins with that one silent question. Can I trust this founder enough to continue the purchase or the conversation? And I want you to notice something else, is that people don't usually reject founders because their products are bad. They reject uncertainty when there isn't enough information, the communication is unclear, when expertise just is not visible. People just move on to someone else. And that's not because you failed, it's because someone else has reduced their uncertainty faster. So this is why I often say your reputation starts selling before your sales team or strategy does. Your founder brand is quietly working every single hour of the day. Every interview, every article, customer testimonial, webinar, conference, all the recommendations, everything contributes to how people perceive your business before they even speak to you. And that's why today's discussion is not about logos or branding in the kind of traditional sense. It's about understanding the decision psychology of your customers. So how do people decide who to trust? How do they decide who to contact? And how do they decide who to ignore? And those are the questions that we're going to be answering today. So I'd like everyone to think about this for a moment. Imagine someone searches your name. What would they discover in the first 5 minutes of a quick Google search? Would those results increase their confidence or would they create uncertainty? So you don't have to write this in the chat, just have a good think about it and we'll come back to this later on in the session. So let's explore why that shift has happened. About a decade or two ago, business operated very differently. Customers mainly trusted companies. Large organizations built trust through advertising, brand recognition, and years of market presence. Marketing departments obviously controlled the customers or the company's message. Products built the reputation. The founder often just stayed behind the scenes. And today, that model has completely changed. People no longer trust the organizations first. They trust the people. So if you look at some of the companies that you admire, many of them are actually associated with their founders, their founder-led brands. And not because those founders actually want a celebrity status, but because they become the clearest representation of what the business actually stands for. So today's customers want transparency, investors want accessibility to the founder, and employees want leadership that they can relate to. So partners want confidence in the person behind the business, and that's why founders increasingly become the face of their companies. It doesn't mean that every single founder needs to become an influencer, and that is obviously a common misunderstanding. It just means that people want to understand who is leading the company, what do they believe, what problem are they solving, and would I enjoy working with them? So those questions influence the business decisions every day. And in many industries, your reputation now travels much faster than your product actually does. Before someone buys your solution, they often buy into you and your leadership. And that's exactly why founder branding has become a strategic business advantage rather than just marketing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts if you want to pop down that in the chat. Why do you think people today trust founders more than companies? So there's obviously no right or wrong answers here, and we can discuss what's changed today in today's business environment before we move on to our first founder comparison. Cool. Everyone's being quiet today. That's okay. This goes live on LinkedIn, so if there's any conversation that happens in the comments, I'll keep an eye out on it, and we can have a chat in the comments as well. So, why do some founders get every single opportunity? I'd like to begin with a simple exercise. So, imagine that there's two startup founders. Both have obviously worked incredibly hard. They've built really innovative products. They have technical expertise, and they both genuinely believe their solution can solve a real world problem. Yet something quite interesting happens. So one founder is consistently invited to pitch to investors, they're asked to speak at startup events. Industry experts tend to introduce them to potential partners, and customers seem to be willing to trust them almost immediately. Meanwhile, the second founder, despite having an equally strong product, struggles to get replies to emails, they struggle to secure meetings or attract meaningful opportunities. The obvious question is why? Why does that happen? So was one product dramatically better? Not necessarily. Was one founder more intelligent? Probably not. So often the biggest difference is how visible their expertise is before the first conversation ever begins. So let's look at this comparison on this slide. So founder A has an excellent product. They have strong technical knowledge, and they're limited. They have limited professional visibility and rarely shares industry insights. So now let's look at founder B. Their product is equally good, but this founder regularly shares expertise. They publish their valuable insights, and they often speak at different events. So people recognize them within the startup ecosystem, and that's something important. Founder B didn't become successful because they're famous. They became recognized because they consistently demonstrated expertise where the right people could see it. And that's a significant difference between having the expertise and then making that expertise visible. A lot of founders believe that if my product isn't good enough, if my product is good enough, people eventually discover it. And unfortunately, that's just not how modern business works. If you think about your own behavior as a customer, if someone introduces you to a consultant, for example, or a startup or a business partner, you don't immediately make that decision. You go into information gathering mode, you search, you evaluate, you reduce your uncertainty. And that's exactly what investors and customers do as well. So every founder is competing for one very limited resource, and attention almost always comes before the opportunity. So imagine you are an investor. You only have one slot available for a meeting. Founder A has built an outstanding product, but has no public presence. And then founder B has a similar product, but regularly shares knowledge, speaks at events, and contributes to industry discussions. Who would you actually meet first? Would that be founder A or founder B? And why did you choose that founder? Was it because they seemed smarter, or because they gave you more confidence? And that's obviously the real lesson here. People invest in the confidence of the founder before they invest in the products.
So if opportunities don't happen by accident, how do founders intentionally create them? Which brings us to our next slide.
Yeah, so most founders believe that they're selling only one thing, either their software, their product, their service, their technology. But every successful founder is actually making 3 invisible sales every day. So let's take a look at them. So first, you obviously sell yourself. And this happens before anything else, whether you're speaking to an investor, customer, a journalist, a future employee. Their first question isn't tell me about your product. Instead, it's much more personal. It's tell me about you. Can I trust you? Personal people observe how clearly you communicate, how well you understand your market, whether you listen carefully or whether you explain your ideas confidently, and whether you appear prepared, and whether your passion actually feels genuine. So we need to notice something important, that confidence alone is not enough. People invest in founders who combine confidence with the competence, and that's why your communication style matters so much. Second, we look at how you sell your business as a whole. Once people believe in you as a person, as a founder, only then do they fully evaluate the business as a whole. Now this is when the question kind of becomes a bit different. So what problem does this business solve? Who needs it? Why is it different? Why now? Can I scale it? And this is where your startup earns commercial credibility. And many founders spend months improving their product presentation without realizing that people first needed confidence around the founder that's presenting it. So third, this is where you sell your vision. People ask themselves, where is this company actually going? Customers don't buy products forever. Employees don't join companies forever. Investors don't fund today's business. They invest in tomorrow's possibility. And that's why the vision matters. Your vision explains where you're going, why the journey matters, why other people should come with you. And without that vision, people might only just buy once. With the vision, people obviously stay. So I'd like everyone to think really honestly about their own business. So when you introduce your startup, which of these 3 receives the most attention? Do you spend 20 minutes explaining your features and then only 30 seconds introducing yourself? Or perhaps you never actually paint the picture. So take a moment to reflect, because sometimes the biggest improvement isn't actually changing your product. It's about changing the order that you tell your story, or even how you tell your story. So now we understand what the founders are selling. The next question becomes, how do people actually decide whether they believe in you? And that's exactly why and how this framework works. So the founder operating system. So this is a confidence framework, and this is probably my favorite framework in today's presentation, because it explains something that happens in almost every single business conversation, whether you realize it or not. So their brain is asking a series of questions. It's not all at once, and it's step by step. So let's work through this together. So stage 1 is credibility. And the very first question is simple. Can I believe this founder? Do I trust this founder? So before you discuss your revenue, your pricing, people ask, is this person genuine? Do they understand their industry? And can I believe what they're saying? And without that credibility, the conversation usually ends there. Stage 2 is trust. So once credibility is established, people tend to move on to the second question. So can I take this risk? Because every business decision involves uncertainty. Customers risk their money, investors risk their capital, employees risk their careers, and partners risk their reputation. So trust reduces that perceived risk. And that's why founders who communicate consistently make the decision-making process easier. Stage 3 is the conversation. So this is where something changes. So instead of evaluating, people begin engaging with you. They ask questions, they explore the possibilities, they request demonstrations, they schedule another meeting. The conversation is the buying signal. and people don't invest their time unless they are genuinely interested. Stage 4 is the problem and solution. Only now does the discussion that we're having become a lot more deeply commercial. People begin asking, does this solution genuinely fit our problem? Have they understood our requirements? Can they actually deliver what they're promising? And we need to notice something interesting here. Many founders actually start their presentation with this, but according to this framework, people haven't even decided whether they trust you yet. And finally, we move on to business growth. This is where everything comes together. The relationships start expanding, the customers start returning, partners collaborate again, investors introduce you to other people, and employees recommend your company. This is where your reputation begins creating opportunities without constantly having to sell. This is what we mean by reputation creates opportunity. A strong reputation doesn't remove the need to sell, it just makes it a lot easier. So I'd like everyone to rate themselves. Think about your own startup. What stage of this framework do you feel like you're strongest in? Is it credibility, trust, conversation, problem solving, or is it long-term business growth? And which stage actually needs the most improvement? So you can just write this one word in the chat, write it in your notebook, or we'll catch up later on in the comments. And this will help everyone realize that building a founder brand isn't just one activity, and it's a sequence of behaviors and habits that strengthen every business relationship.
Brilliant. Thank you, Amy. And now that we've understood how opportunities are created, let's move to the next question. How do investors, customers, and partners actually decide who deserves a yes before someone else? In the next section, we'll explore the opportunity filter, founder leverage, and becoming known without going viral. These slides shift from understanding perspective and perception to learning how founders intentionally build long-term influence. Moving on to our next slide. And this framework really explains why reputation matters before business growth can happen. And we're going to move into something that every founder experiences but rarely talks about. Have you ever wondered why some founders receive immediate responses to emails, invitations to meetings, or investor introductions, while others struggle just to get a reply? This next slide explains exactly why. Amy, over to you.
Thank you so much. So I'd like everyone to imagine something. Put yourself in these shoes. So tomorrow morning, you're an investor. Before 10 a.m., you've already received 25 emails from different founders asking for various different meetings. And by lunchtime, you've then received another 15 LinkedIn messages. And by the end of the day, you've seen dozens of different startup pitches. Now you ask yourself, how do you actually decide who to respond to? Would you read every single business plan? Probably not. Would you schedule meetings with every single person? Absolutely not. So instead, your brain starts filtering those people. And that's exactly what this slide represents. And it's called the opportunity filter. So every founder, whether they realize it or not, is evaluated through 5 different questions. So let's walk through them. So the very first question is this founder solving a problem that actually matters? And people immediately ask, who is this for? What problem are they solving? Why is this important right now? And if your problem's not relevant in that time frame or relevant to them as a person, nothing else matters. The second question starts to become, can I actually trust this founder? People don't tend to ask, are they confident? Confidence can be rehearsed and credibility is the one that's earned. So people often look for signals like your previous experience, the customer stories, your achievements, industry knowledge, and that evidence always speaks louder than the empty promises that you make. Now comes one of the hardest questions. Why this founder instead of someone else? Every single market is crowded. Every industry has competitors. So your job isn't simply to just explain what you do. It's to explain why your approach deserves attention. Differentiation isn't always about building something that nobody else has built. Sometimes it's about explaining familiar ideas just in a better or different way. So now imagine someone wants to know more about you. They search your name. What do they find? Do they find a professional profile, a company website, different articles written about you, or videos on YouTube, or customer testimonials? Or do they simply find absolutely nothing? So visibility doesn't create that expertise, but without visibility, people might never discover your expertise. And finally, we talk about consistency. So people compare everything that they've seen. Does your LinkedIn profile match what you're saying on your website? Does your presentation match the messaging and your tone of voice? And does your communication reinforce the same story that you've been telling? Consistency creates confidence. Any mixed messages that you have creates a lot of hesitation. So before any opportunity arrives, people unknowingly ask these 5 questions. The founders who answer them well usually receive more opportunities, not because they have more luck, and it's because they've reduced that uncertainty that people come with. And this is a really powerful framework. So again, I'd like you to think about your own startup. And if you have to improve just one of these 5 areas, so relevance, credibility, differentiation, visibility, or consistency, which one of these would it be? So you can type this in the chat, you can have a think about it to yourself. So let's see where everyone feels like they need to grow. So let's move on.
Thank you, Amy, for sharing. So let's move into one of my favourite concepts from today's webinar, the power of founder positioning. I really like this phrase, founder leverage. I don't think many founders think about their reputation as leverage. Could you explain what that actually means, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with a question. So imagine you're spending 3 hours preparing for a webinar. After that webinar ends, what happens? Most founders would say this webinar's finished, but smart founders would think differently. They ask, how can this one activity that we've done continue creating more value? And that's leverage. So founder leverage means turning one action into multiple business outcomes. One webinar can become a LinkedIn article, a newsletter, a podcast clip, a YouTube video, a conversation with a customer, a speaking invitation, and a partnership. The effort stays pretty much the same, but the return becomes much greater. So look to the right of this slide. There are 3 ways that founders can build leverage. We've got knowledge leverage. So every founder learns something through experience. And unfortunately, many founders keep that knowledge inside their own heads, but successful founders convert that knowledge into reusable assets. Like we said before, guides, articles, frameworks, playbooks, presentations, and these assets continue working longer than after they were created. Relationship leverage. So the second type is relationships. Networking isn't just about being transactional and collecting business cards. It's about building meaningful relationships. And one genuine relationship can introduce you to 10 new opportunities. Relationships compound over time. And finally, content. So most founders obviously create content and then they just forget about it. But successful founders repurpose that content. One content idea becomes cross-posted across multiple different formats and multiple different platforms. Your one customer journey, for example, that can create a LinkedIn post, it can become a webinar, a short video, a newsletter, or a case study. And instead of constantly reinventing the wheel and creating new content, you're constantly multiplying that one content. And that's leverage.
Brilliant, thank you. I'd love everyone to answer this one. Think about something you've created recently, maybe a presentation, a blog, a customer success story, or even today's webinar. How many different ways could you reuse it? Share an idea in the chat if you feel comfortable, and we can inspire each other. And that's exactly how founders begin thinking strategically instead of tactically. So moving on now. Becoming known without going viral. This is probably one of the biggest myths in entrepreneurship. Many founders believe they need thousands or even millions of followers before people take them seriously. Amy, do founders really need to go viral?
Not at all. In fact, going viral is often one of the least reliable ways to grow a business. So I want to compare two different situations again. So, for example, founder A has 500,000 followers, got a huge audience, but very few of those are potential customers. Few of them are investors, few can create any sort of business opportunity. So now we compare that with founder B, and they just have 500 people. But those 500 include customers, investors, industry leaders, media professionals, partners, advisors. Who do we think actually has the stronger network there? And most likely it's founder B. And that's why I always say, don't chase popularity. You need to chase relevance. So the goal isn't actually to become famous. The goal is to become unforgettable in your industry. So let's look at the micro authority model. That begins with just one problem, not 10, just one. So you serve one specific audience, you share one distinctive perspective, and you build repeated recognition. And eventually people start beginning associating your name with that specific expertise. And that's micro authority. So let's look at the final section. Micro authority is built through proximity. So you notice where every single successful founder spends their time. It's not everywhere. It's in the right communities, the right founder groups, industry events, roundtables, professional associations, or newsletters. They repeatedly show up where their audience already exists. And that's how reputation grows. It's obviously not through just luck, it's through consistency.
Brilliant, thank you. I'd like to leave everyone with one question before we move ahead. If you could become known for just one thing in your industry, what would you want people to remember you for? Please write a sentence in the chat if you feel comfortable or in your own notebooks. For example, I want to become known as the founder helping healthcare startups scale with AI. Or I want to become the first person founders think of when they need fundraising advice. Those answers are incredibly valuable because that's where your founder brand truly begins. So moving on to what is your founder brand really communicating? So far, we've discussed how founders create opportunities, build leverage, and become recognized within the right communities. But here's an interesting question. Today, everyone is creating content. Everyone is posting on LinkedIn, all the platforms, and everyone is sharing business advice. So how do people decide who is actually worth paying attention to? That's exactly what this next slide is about. Amy, over to you.
Fab, thank you. So again, I want everyone to imagine something. You open LinkedIn tomorrow morning, you see probably 100 different posts. Someone is celebrating that they've got funding, someone's sharing a motivational quote, someone's talking about productivity, and someone's announcing something new. You need to ask yourself now, how many of these posts will you actually remember tomorrow? Probably very few. And why? And that's because a lot of them create noise. So let's understand the difference. So signal is communication that increases people's confidence in your expertise, and noise is communication that creates attention but adds very little value. So let's look at the left of this slide. What creates signal? Sharing real customer stories, publishing original industry insights, demonstrating how you solve problems, speaking at relevant industry events. You need to notice something. None of these activities are about showing off. They're about helping people understand your expertise. So now let's look at the right side. What creates that noise? Posting without purpose, following every single trend simply just because everyone else is doing it, that constant self-promotion, and talking about yourself more than your customer outcomes. Those things might create temporary attention, but attention doesn't always create those opportunities. So let me give you a bit of an example. So imagine two founders. Founder A posts every single day, but every post sounds exactly like everyone else. And then founder B only posts once every 2 weeks. But that post contains a really practical lesson. Could be a customer insight or a business experience. So now you need to ask yourself, which founder would you actually remember after 6 months? And most people would remember founder B because signal lasts a lot longer than noise. As founders, we don't need to communicate more. We just need to communicate more meaningfully. Every single piece of communication should answer this one question. Does this help people understand why I'm good at what I do? And if the answer is yes, then you're building signal. And if not, you're probably just adding to the noise.
I really like that distinction. So let's make this practical. Everyone think about the last thing that you posted online. Was it creating signal or was it simply creating activity? Just type one word in the chat, signal or noise. And don't worry, this isn't about judging anyone. It's about helping us think differently about communication. And that self-awareness is exactly where stronger founder brands begin. So moving on, the 80-20 rule of founder communication. So now that we understand the difference between signal and noise, how do founders make sure every post actually strengthens their reputation? Amy, could you explain this framework for us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe that this is one of the simplest frameworks that every founder can start using immediately. So before publishing, don't ask, will this get a lot of likes? Instead, ask, will this strengthen my reputation? And that's obviously a completely different question. So if we look at the 5 questions on this slide, whenever you're about to post, whenever you're about to publish a post, whether it's an article or record a video or even speak at a public event, you need to ask yourself these questions. First, does it demonstrate my expertise? If someone reads this, will they understand what I'm genuinely knowledgeable about? Second, does it solve a problem for my audience? People rarely remember the content that only talks about the creator. They remember the content that actually helps them. Third, does this reinforce what I want to be known for? Remember what we discussed earlier. Every founder wants to own a very specific space. Every post should reinforce that positioning. Fourth, would a potential customer or investor find this valuable? So you need to imagine your dream investor reading today's post. Would it increase their confidence or just simply entertain them? And finally, will this be relevant 6 months from now? Some content disappears within hours, and some content continues to build authority for years. Founders should aim to create more evergreen value. Now, think about the title of this slide, the 80-20 rule. Often just 20% of your communication creates nearly all of your professional authority. And that's why quality always matters way more than quantity. I'd rather see founders publish one outstanding insight every single month than 30 forgettable posts. Authority compounds just like trust.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Amy. I'd love everyone to try something. Think about the next LinkedIn post that you're planning to publish, and now ask yourself these 5 questions. Would you still publish it exactly as it is, or would you improve it? Please type publish or improve in the chat. Sometimes the biggest improvement isn't posting more, it's thinking more before posting. So moving on to our case study discussion. It's time for something interactive. We're going to finish today's learning section with a real business discussion. Amy has prepared a comparison between 2 founders. There's no right or wrong answers. The goal is to understand how founder perception influences business decisions. Amy, let's begin.
Thank you. So let's imagine that you're part of an investment committee. You have time to meet only one founder this week. So let's compare them. Founder A, 80,000 social media followers, posts motivational content every day, frequently goes viral. It obviously sounds impressive. So let's look at their business outcomes. Very few investor conversations. They have limited customer engagement and very few strategic partnerships. A large audience, but obviously not necessarily the right audience. So now let's look at founder B. They've only got 1,200 LinkedIn followers. It's a much smaller audience, but they regularly publish specialist insights. They speak at niche events. They're recommended by industry professionals, and customers tend to approach them. So investors recognize their expertise. So here's my question. Who has the stronger founder brand? Most people immediately focus on follower numbers, but investors rarely invest in followers. Customers rarely buy from the follower accounts, and business opportunities come from relevance, not popularity. And that's why I love ending this webinar with this case study, because it completely changes how founders think about visibility. The objective is not to become famous. The objective is to become valuable. When your industry begins with recommending your name, you've built something much stronger than just popularity. You've built authority.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so let's make this interactive. Everyone, if you only had one meeting available tomorrow, which founder would you choose? So if you're live online now, if you type founder A or founder B in the chat or any of the platforms that you're viewing on, or just something to consider if you're watching later. Now, moving on to, have we got any chats coming in? No?
I don't think so, but
okay, we will follow up with those.
That's fine. Thinking about your own kind of decision between founder A or founder B, I want you to notice something really interesting. So it goes back to what we've discussed earlier on in the frameworks: credibility, relevance, visibility, consistency, signal, and micro authority. None of these require millions of followers. All of them require clarity. And that's today's biggest lesson. And it's very simple. So please don't remember the loudest founder. They remember the founder who consistently demonstrates expertise. They solve meaningful problems and become known for something that's really valuable. And that's why building a founder brand truly matters.
Brilliant. Thank you, Amy. And that brings us to the end of today's presentation. We've covered how founder reputation influences opportunity, how to position yourself strategically, how to build authority without chasing popularity, and how every piece of communication shapes your professional identity. And now we really would love to hear from you. Please feel free to ask anything related to today's session, whether it's about your startup, founder positioning, attracting investors, building authority, or creating opportunities? And we'll answer any questions that we get. So I'll just start with a few questions that founders commonly ask. Amy, many early stage founders believe I'll start building my founder brand once my company becomes successful. Would you recommend waiting?
Absolutely not. That is one of the biggest misconceptions. So a founder brand shouldn't begin after success. It should be the thing that's growing alongside your business. So if you think about it this way, your customers or investors, employees or partners, they don't suddenly start researching you after you've become successful. They research you from the very first interaction they have with you. Every presentation, conversation, or article, or customer meeting, they contribute to your professional reputation. So if you wait until your startup is established, you're missing the years of opportunities to build your credibility. So your founder brand isn't something that you can just automatically switch on later. It's something that you need to build every single day, and that's intentionally.
Yeah, and I suppose if done in the right way, using the framework that we've talked about, that's an opportunity to build that credibility when you're going right from the beginning and explaining who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. So just moving on to another question. What if someone isn't comfortable speaking publicly or creating videos? Can they still build a strong founder brand?
Yeah, absolutely. Just because we talk about visibility, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stand up on a stage or sit in front of a camera. Some founders build authority through the different articles that they write, like Substack, LinkedIn, or blogs. Others published industry research, and some become known through their customer success stories. Others contribute through professional communities, so networking events. So obviously we've spoken about the objective isn't to become an influencer. The objective is to make your expertise discoverable. So you need to choose a communication style that works for you, works for your personality, and allows you actually to maintain the consistency. People respect that authenticity much more than you struggling to talk in front of camera.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm just thinking also, how can founders decide what they should become known for?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I guess I want you to start with 3 questions. First, what problem does my business solve? Who benefits from that solution? And then what unique experience or perspective can I bring to the conversation? And the intersection of those answers often becomes where you position yourself. Trying to be known for everything usually results in people being remembered for absolutely nothing. So the clarity that you gain is much more powerful than the variety.
And I guess really, thinking about why it is you started doing what you're doing is
Yeah.
the initial starting point, isn't it? Brilliant. So many founders worry that they don't have enough experience to share valuable insights. What advice would you give to them about that for that?
So experience isn't just measured by the amount of years that you've been working. It's measured by all the lessons that you've learned, the experiences that you've had. So if you've solved a customer problem, or you've completed a really cool project, or you've made a mistake and then you've improved from that mistake, or you've learned something valuable whilst just building your startup, you already have insights that are worth sharing. People connect with practical real life experiences because they are real and relatable.
Brilliant. And if you could give founders just one piece of advice from today's webinar, what would it be?
I think don't focus on becoming famous, unless obviously that's your goal and you want to be famous. But focus on becoming something really useful. The founders who consistently solve really meaningful problems and that they communicate with clarity, they create value for their audience, they are the ones that naturally become trusted over time. Authority, you can't build that overnight. It's built through the really small, consistent actions that you repeat over months, over years.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Amy. We'd really love to hear about your own startup journey as well. Feel free to share the challenge you're currently facing, and Amy can offer some guidance based on today's topic. So before we conclude today's session, I'd like to briefly introduce an exciting opportunity for founders who are serious about taking the next step in their entrepreneurial journey. At LSET, we don't just organise webinars, we support founders throughout their startup journey. If today's discussion has inspired you to build your business, refine your strategy, or prepare for growth, we'd encourage you to explore the LSET Startup Incubator. Amy, would you like to share a few words about why programs like this are valuable for founders?
Yeah, absolutely. So building a startup obviously can feel like a really lonely journey. And a lot of different founders have really good ideas, but they struggle with the execution of those ideas or the fundraising, customer acquisition, or even just the strategic decision making. And that's where these startup ecosystems become really valuable. An incubator provides much more than just training. It offers mentorship, practical guidance, industry exposure, and it allows connection with fellow founders and access to experts, and obviously the opportunities to accelerate your business growth. So one of the biggest advantages is learning from people who've already faced the challenges that you're experiencing today. So if you are building a startup, or even you're planning to start one, I really encourage you to explore programs like the LSET Startup Incubator, because this can significantly reduce your learning curve and help you make more informed business decisions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Amy. And you can find more information by visiting the LSET Startup Incubator page shown on the screen. We encourage everyone to have a look and explore the opportunities available. And as we come to the end of today's webinar, I'd like to thank every one of you for taking the time to join us. Your participation and involvement and being present in today's discussion even made it even more engaging. A very special thank you to our special speaker, Amy, for sharing such practical insights and helping us understand that a founder's brand is about much more than visibility. It's about creating credibility, relevance, and long-term business opportunities. Amy, thank you once again for being with us today.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you all. I really hope that today's session has encouraged you to think differently about your role as a founder. And just as a wrap up, please remember that your startup may introduce you to the wider market, but your reputation determines how far those opportunities will actually take you. Every single conversation that you have, or customer that you help, or relationship that you build contribute to the founder that you are actually becoming. So you do not need thousands of followers. You don't need to go viral. You just need to become someone who your industry trusts, remembers, and recommends. I really wish each of you the very best in your entrepreneurial journey, and I hope to see your startup grow and succeed in the future. So thank you so much and have a really good day.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today. If you found today's webinar valuable, we'd really appreciate it if you could share your feedback with us. Please stay connected with LSET by following our social media channels, where we regularly share upcoming webinars, startup resources, expert sessions, and new opportunities for founders. We look forward to welcoming you to our future events. Until then, stay curious, keep building, and keep creating impact. Thank you once again.